Well, guys, I didn't think I'd need to talk about the World Cup again, but it seems Gary Neville's back with yet more virtue signalling hypocrisy and stupidity. Yes, this complete clown decided before the World Cup final kicked off to go on a little rant that Labour would be proud of, equating workers' rights in Qatar to the current government and NHS strikes.
You what?
Yeah, I kid you not, this virtue signalling minge flap compared a woke rainbow puke supporting Tory government to a strict Muslim one, and with a straight face I should add. He did this all while he virtue signalled about NHS staff going on strike because they've not been offered a 19 or 26% pay rise. Oh yeah, the demands are insane, but let's take a look at what this plonker actually said.
Low pay. We should detest poor accommodation and poor working conditions. And that is something that we can never ever accept in this region or in any region. And it is just worth mentioning that we've got a current government in our country who are demonising rail workers, ambulance workers and terrifyingly nurses. So in our country we've got to look at workers' rights, but certainly when football goes now we have to make sure we pick up on workers' rights wherever it goes, because people have got to be equal and they've got to be treated equal. We can't have people being paid an absolute pittance to work. We can't have people in accommodation which is unsavoury and disgusting. We can't have that. That shouldn't happen here with the wealth that exists, but it shouldn't happen in our country that our nurses are having to fight for an extra £1 or an extra £2 either.
Interesting in Gabriel's report, he talks about the uplift in the revenues from this World Cup, which is an extra billion. The one thing FIFA really can do is this legacy.
Well, I would be shocked, but in all honesty, it's Gary bloody Neville. This wet wipe is often talking a bag of shit, but here the hypocrisy is epic, because he himself has been paid for work by the Qatari government in the past, and let's be honest, he's over there covering the World Cup while he's saying this.
Ah, the hypocrite speaks!
Obviously, before he started that little monologue, he didn't see the hypocrisy, and that shows the stupidity of this clown, but him comparing the government to the Qatari one is beyond laughable, I'm sure you would agree.
And it is just worth mentioning that we've got a current government in our country who are demonising rail workers, ambulance workers and terrifyingly nurses. So in our country we've got to look at workers' rights, but certainly when football goes now we have to make sure we pick up on workers' rights wherever it goes, because people have got to be equal and they've got to be treated equal. We can't have people being paid an absolute pittance to work.
I mean shit, let's be real here, the people striking are all on 33 grand a year average and only do like 3 days a week in most cases. Yet apparently they need 19% more, and this doesn't even include them moonlighting as agency nurses for like £20 to £60 a bloody hour. This means that any doctor, nurse or NHS tosspot who's working full time and claiming they need food banks is simply living beyond their means. They've likely got 20 lines of credit sucking away their monthly pay packet because the TV told them they need to buy this latest consumer product. It's got nothing to do with low wages at all, and is more to do with people living a life their pay packet don't bloody allow for. But I guess the easiest way to tell you this is all bollocks is because none of these people moaning about NHS wages are ready to quit their job, you know, and find a bloody new one. I know for a fact if I didn't like my job or it didn't pay me enough, I'd look for a better one, but these strikers won't do that because it's not about the bloody money. This is the unions using strikers to damage the government and help Labour into power as they plan to nationalise everything and then the unions hold power like they did back in the 70s. I mean shit, when we have nationalised energy, which Starmer said weeks ago he would do, you can be sure that the unions will use a cold winter like now to demand more money or the energy grid will shut down. If we had nationalised energy as we speak, then that is where we would be, because they'd be on strike with the rest of these wankers, as I'm sure you know. The NHS tosspot striking by far has to be the scummiest one of all when you consider not only saving the NHS for 2 years, but the fact that NHS funding has risen year on year, and not by no chump change either. It's literally gone from 115 billion to 130 billion in like 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, and now is up by 26 billion on that for the next few years, as this graph shows, with 150 odd billion planning to be spent. Shit, the NHS got more funding than the fucking GDP of Ukraine in 2018, and yet these idiots tell us it's underfunded and people bloody believe it. In fact, the amount of idiots I see parroting that the NHS is underfunding is astonishing, yet just comparing it to the funding of the GDPs of other countries proves it bloody ain't. Shit, let's actually do that now as I say it. Here you can see the list of countries by GDP, so let's get down to the 130 to 150 billion pound a year level. Oh yes, here we are. As you can see, $166 billion is probably close to the 150 billion mark, I bet, so the NHS spends as much as the GDP of oil-rich Qatar. It costs more than the Hungary's GDP, Angola, Kuwait, Ukraine, Morocco and Ecuador, so calling it underfunded is the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. And trust me, I've heard plenty of bullshit in my time. Now, of course, they say that don't account for inflation and all this, but of course they're forgetting if the government prints more money to pay for these demented pay rises, then the inflation goes up once again. No one's wages have matched inflation because these scumbags in Parliament keep wasting money on bullshit like net zero, so they print billions to pay for it. Shit, you want to fund the NHS more, then go get the government to stop that taxpayer con job and you can bloody have it. They print the GDP of small countries to pay for that alongside the NHS yearly, so the screaming lefties can go after that, but obviously you won't hear a word. Diversity and lived experience wankers getting 110 grand a year is not the issue according to them. No, it's the government not paying them enough. Oh, and actually last I checked it wasn't even the government that decided their bloody pay. So essentially this is all just bollocks being used as a political tool by the unions themselves. Gary Neville is just a sort of parrot who carries on with this sort of shit and has no actual idea what he's talking about. That's why he did his little monologue there that it's got to be said the other host who asked him the question bloody ignored.
But it shouldn't happen in our country that our nurses are having to fight for an extra £1 or an extra £2 either.
Interesting in Gabriel's report, he talks about the uplift in the revenues from this World Cup, which is an extra $1 billion.
Yeah, I guess he didn't want to bring politics into sport, but that, as you know, is what Gary Neville and indeed Gary Lineker love to do. They're a pair of sanctimonious tosspots.
Without being good at sport, life would have been very different for me because I was, I was kind of not. I think I would have been bullied at school. They were kind of marginally that way anyway because I was like, this tiny geeky kid with darkish skin, and it was pretty much racist abuse. Although I'm not, I'm as English as they come. Really? All the time. Even in professional football, I had that a couple of times. I wouldn't ever name any names.
Your stupidity might be your one saving grace.
Huh?